house. Yeah, that's fine.
Hi, I'm Keith McCullough, and welcome to another Real Conversation. It's with one of my favorite, not only authors, but thought leaders. Somebody who comes up with stuff before other people do that is actually timely, topical, and over time becomes quite accurate. There are very few things, Jim, that are were as timely, topical as this book, Currency Wars. 2011. Yep. I'm 100% certain that that's when you wrote it, because this morning's early look, I think, guys, you can pop that up there. I write this every day, my rant, my daily rant. So you're part of my rant today, Jim. So right. I just started with just the very basic and the most eloquent thing that you usually do this, but none of this happens in a vacuum.
Right.
And I use that quote. And I also brought it back to the you started by framing this 1770s to 1970.
Right.
And just saying, look, we do this. We taught the world to do this.
Yep.
And I often find that people just are probably in belief of that, but not enough of us talk about that as a matter of fact.
Right.
Do you think that that's because the Bernanks and everyone else doesn't want to take responsibility for it?
Well, they don't, but I think it's bigger than that. I mean, I just am concerned that in general, attention spans are shorter. I've got 3 millennial kids. They're all really bright, really doing well in life. But so I'm kind of pretty well acquainted with the generation through their friends and so forth. They're really smart. They can read. They don't like to read. The rise of podcasts, video casts, and other media. Yep. And it's fine. I do them all. Mm-hmm. But I like to write and I like to read. And you're not a good. You can't be a good writer unless you're a voracious reader. Every writer has said so. So I love writing books, and Currency Wars was the first book. One of the things I said in Currency Wars, so 2011, that's right. It was triggered by Guido Montanga, the Brazilian finance minister, who went to IMF meeting. He was a little bit rude. He said, we're in a currency war. The U.S. is leading a currency war, and everyone was like, please don't say that. That's bad form. But it was true, and he was right. Unfortunately, he's been arrested in the meantime. But I don't know if it was for that comment or not. But so I started writing the book. Came out in the fall of 2011. What I said was that currency wars don't happen all the time, but when they do, they can last for 15 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of historical examples of that. So I'm not at all surprised that here we are in 2019 and we're talking about currency wars. Now, the journalists always act like it's a new currency war. Like, no, it's the same currency war that started in 2010, book came out in 2011. They just don't end easily because there is no logical ending to it. What happens is, and this is happening, and I talk about this in the new book, currency wars don't work. They happen and people try them, and they think that, but they don't really work. And they morph into trade wars. Trade wars don't work either. Again, short-term effects, it suppresses trade, et cetera. And then they morph into shooting wars. And that's what happened in the 20s, 30s, and up to 1939. So you had currency war in the 20s, early 30s, massive trade war in the 30s, and then World War II broke out at the end of the 1930s. So we're 10 years into the currency war, 9 years into the currency war. The trade war started in earnest about a year and a half ago when President Trump through the tariffs on the solar panels and refrigerators, or washing machines. Washing machines. Well, it sounds generic, but it was aimed at the Chinese, and it's escalated from there to tariffs on $200 billion worth of goods. It won't work. We'll win, kind of, but I'll put it this way, Chinese will be hurt more than we will, but it doesn't really solve any of the problems. And then you have to worry, let's hope it doesn't turn into a shooting war. But that is the history, and that's what I talked about in the book.
Yeah, people just finally, the inequality gaps and wedges drive people to the final stage of frustration. I mean, that's a big part of this. We're already there, I mean, obviously in the US. But if you think about the currency war like as just and I know this is hard because we're taking the cyclical moment within the secular trend, which you're as good as anybody on that secular picture. But you have Trump and you have Powell, and Trump, aiding and abetting, Powell to try to devalue. You got to devalue the currency. We got to get asset price reflation.
That's right.
But then you have the UK and what we call Quad 4, growth and inflation slowing at the same time.
Yeah.
Europe will not recover. So you have Draghi fully committed, who's one of the greatest currency war players of all time, I might add.
Totally agree. Yeah.
And you have all these Latin American currencies that are down in a ball of flames. So, how can they actually get it done? Like, can the Fed? What happens if the Fed is cutting rates and the dollar won't go down?
Well, or they're cutting rates and you can't get inflation, which is the other thing. They're two sides of the same coin, no pun intended. Yeah, look, I just got back from Bretton Woods. I was up there earlier in the week. It was the 75th, commemorating the 75th anniversary of the original Bretton Woods. We were at the Mount Washington Hotel, which I've been to before. I just love the hotel.
That must have been cool.
It was very cool. And you walk around the halls and it's got Wi-Fi and amenities and all that stuff. But it's built in 1902. It's the same hotel, wooden floors and columns, and you're walking around like, well, this is where John Maynard Keynes walked, And it's where Harry Dexter White, the Soviet agent, walked.
And people that are there, oh shit, here comes Jim Rickards.
Well, they might have been saying that, but what was interesting is that it was a great group. We had Larry Summers, former Secretary of Treasury, economic advisor, Stephanie Kelton. She's the chief economic advisor to Bernie Sanders 2020. So if he wins, it might be a long shot, but if he wins, she's got some senior position. Ben Steele, brilliant scholar, brilliant writer, head of one of the top scholars at the Council on Foreign Relations. So, a couple doors down from Bob Rubin, so he's pretty plugged in. It was a great group, but at the same time, there was a large crypto element, which is fine. I'm not a big fan of Bitcoin, but I think blockchain will play some role in the future. So that was a younger group. They had yoga mats for everyone. I don't think John Maynard Keynes had a yoga mat. So then there was some shamanism and incense and all that. And I think the only incense in 1944 was cigar smoke.
Yeah.
But so I was a little bit maybe more from the old school. But it was all very interesting. It was a great group. But more to the point, Keith. There was one panel, technically off the record, so I can't give you the names or exact quotes, but two very senior Fed officials and one very senior ECB official. So this was the real deal. And what surprised me, the Fed's going to cut rates 25 basis points next week. Everybody knows that. It's priced in, but it's pretty much of a lock. If there's a wild card next week, they may end QT, quantitative tightening, 2 months early. It's supposed to end in September anyway. If they want to give the market a little double dose, they'll end it in July. So we'll see what happens there. But this panel was just, hey, rates are coming down in Europe and the United States. And it wasn't like, they didn't think it was like front page news. They didn't think it was, some, arcane. They're like, yeah, they've got to come down. And the U.S., the Fed people were talking in a pretty relaxed manner about negative rates. Now, nobody said they're going to be negative rates or that's on the horizon, and we obviously have 2.25 points to go. But they didn't treat it like a taboo subject or something that you couldn't even consider. Yeah. And they were making the distinction, and I rarely hear this because everyone's like, rates are at an all-time low. I was like, well, nominal rates are close to lows, but real rates are not. I got my first mortgage in 1980, and it was 13%. And I told my mother, and she cried. Her first mortgage was like 4% or 3.5%. But I said, Mom, it's like, yeah, it's 13%, but inflation's 15%, and it's tax deductible, and taxes at the time were 50%. So my real rate's only 6.5%. So it's negative, negative 8%. They're paying me to borrow, and I tripled my money on the deal. But so nominal rates have come down from 13 or 14 to 2. Got it. But real rates have not come down. I mean, depending on there are 20 different inflation metrics, but I just look at PCE core year over year because that's what the Fed looks at, and that's 1.6%. And if you use, I use 10-year note yield maturity because that to me is a good proxy for business investment and mortgages. So that it's about 2.1 now. So yeah, it's half a point positive. Real, which is in my day it was 3 points negative. So real rates are still high, and they kind of acknowledge that, and so they said we got to get real rates down.
Well, particularly if they're sitting there with a senior official at the ECB. I mean, if they're trying to get along, they're at least going to entertain the very basic fact that they have negative interest rates as far as the eye can see, and that's what they think works.
And he was relaxed about going more negative. He was like, yeah, that's going to happen. so yeah, they're going to go more negative. Now here's the thing. The idea of negative rates as a stimulus is just not true. It's a complete failure.
An economic stimulus?
An economic stimulus. It simply doesn't work. And the research is coming in, and here's what it reveals.
The market stimulus? Spies?
Well, a market's like a stock's like, no, it inflates asset values, but I'm talking about
economic stimulus.
Real growth. And what happens is, so the theory is, the lower you get in the liquidity trap, you're going to lower interest rates, and you're going to want to spend your money. But if I make them negative, you're really going to want to spend your money because you put $100,000 in the bank at negative 1%. You come back a year later, there's 99,000 in the bank, where'd your money go? So the idea is it will cause people to spend money, lend and spend, get the aggregate demand up, get the the lending and spending machine in gear again. That's not what happens. What people say is, this is Modigliani, people have lifetime goals. Your retirement, parents' health care, your health care, kids' education, whatever it is. If you're saving for that and I give you a negative rate, you actually save more.
Yep.
So it adds to the liquidity trap. So why would you do it? Well, there are two reasons. One is currency wars, and the other one is just to prop up the banks, and certainly Europe needs that. So the lower the rate, the lower the funding for the banks. They charge a little something, you leverage it 10 to 1, you get 20% returns on equity with very low risk. So there are reasons to do it, but economic stimulus is not one of them. But the Fed was, again, they didn't predict negative rates. We still have a ways to go, but they were, that could happen.
Well, it's an interesting shift, and it's, I guess, predictable to a great extent. I mean, even if you go back, and we have our Fed connections to Don Cohn, who you works for Hedgeye, former vice head of the Fed. But even at the Hoover Institute this year, which is maybe one of the last places that you would have seen it, I don't know if you were there, but there was the talk of MMT was becoming fluid.
Right.
It used to be, are you kidding me?
Yep.
Now it's like, maybe I could be the next famous central banker, central planner, whatever you want to call it, central market planner,
right,
to go there. And why wouldn't Trump and Elizabeth Warren want that?
Well, Elizabeth Warren does. She hasn't spoken about it specifically, but certainly, well, it's fine. The 2020 Democratic presidential candidates, you don't hear them say MMT. You hear that from Warren Mosler and Stephanie Kelton, and Paul McCulley is an advocate of MMT.
Well, presidential candidate can't really say, MMT doesn't mean anything to your normal person.
But judge from their behavior and their policy. So in the past, what do we have? Green New Deal, free health care, child care for all, free tuition, student loan forgiveness, go down the list. And I don't want to debate the policies. It's all out there. They've said that. And it used to be you could shut down the debate in about 2 seconds. You say, well, it's interesting stuff, but we can't afford it. And then people go, yeah, you're right, we can't afford it. We got to. But now you say, interesting, we can't afford it, and they say, yes, we can. And the reason is because of MMT. MMT posits that you can spend as much as you want. And I'm not exaggerating. I've actually, it's painful, but I've actually read their literature because
I have too. It is
I have a whole chapter in my book Aftermath about MMT.
Is MMT in Aftermath?
Oh yeah, there's a whole.
Okay. By the way, for those of you that don't know, this could be my second favorite book from Rickards. We're going to have to see. I have to actually read it and dog-ear it like I do everything else. But Aftermath. This is Jim Rickards' new book, and ostensibly you're basically going to say, how do you protect your assets?
Right.
If we're to go through MMT, so you go through that.
Yeah. Well, I have a whole chapter on MMT. The chapter is called Free Money,
because there'll be money to be made in MMT. It's not going to be the people that don't manage money. It's going to be, the 80 or 90% of those poor bastards, which is the rest of America, is going to pay the bill.
Right. Look, if it becomes policy, it'll affect markets. So there's money to be made or lost, depending on what side of it you're on. So the chapter is called Free Money, a little tribute to Patti Smith. And so what MMT says, first of all, they integrate the balance sheets of the Treasury and the Fed like this. Now, we know they're separate institutions. One's executive branch, one's independent, et cetera. But they said, no, it's just one big happy family here in Washington. So they integrate the balance sheets of the Treasury and the Fed. And they say, literally, spend as much as you want, borrow the money, and if the bond markets get itchy, the Fed can buy it and monetize the debt, put it on the balance sheet, wait 30 years, and get paid. What's the problem? And of all the things I've debated, for years I've been dragged into these gold versus Bitcoin debates, which I think are ridiculous. I like gold, but the debate is kind of ridiculous. But this is one where it took me a while to develop the critique. Because when you first hear it and you first understand it, you're like, well, what is the problem? And they say, here's the proof. Japan's debt to GDP ratio is 250%. U.S. is 106%, highest since World War II. That's problematic for a lot of reasons we can get into. But they're like, hey, Japan's more than twice the size, so what's the problem? And by the way, if you want empirical evidence, we've got Ben Bernanke. Because what did Ben Bernanke do? He took the Fed balance sheet from $800 billion to almost $4.5 trillion, all printed money. I understand it's M0 and it was put back in reserves. I get all that, but the fact is he printed almost $4 trillion to do two things. One, bail out the banks and prop up Jamie Dimon's bonus. That was, I think, it was the main objective. And then, in theory, there was a wealth effect. Well, you got the higher asset prices, but you never got the wealth effect. It just concentrated wealth, made the income inequality worse. But so So they say Bernanke proved that you can print $4 trillion and nothing bad happens. There was no inflation, nothing significant. The world didn't come to an end. There was not another financial crisis. So the fact that he wanted to print $4 trillion to help Jamie Dimon, well, okay, we want to print $4 trillion to do the Green New Deal or forgive student loans or health care for all. And Bernanke proved you can do it. So when you get the first item, first data point, yeah, Japan is more than twice as high. 2, Bernanke did print $4 trillion, nothing bad happened. There's no legal impediment. I mean, the Fed can take their balance sheet wherever they want, and they can. There's no, and I think I've related this before. I was at a small private dinner with one of the members of the Board of Governors, and I said, after a glass of wine, I said, you work for an insolvent institution on a mark-to-market basis. The Fed doesn't mark-to-market, they use historic cost, but I said, your institution's insolvent. He said, no, we're not. I said, no one's done that math. I said, well, actually, I have, and I think others have as well. And she kind of harumphed and said, well, maybe, but central banks don't need capital. That was an exact quote. Central banks don't need capital. Legally, they don't. It was a true statement. Query the impact on confidence down the road, but that's a separate issue. So the point is, you actually could take the balance sheet to $10 trillion. You could finance a couple of years worth of Green New Deal, and Bernanke did something like it for different reasons, and nothing bad happened. So that's their argument. And then Stephanie Kelton's the big brain. She's a very nice lady, a professor at Stony Brook State University in New York out on Long Island. And she said, and by the way, if inflation emerged, we can deal with that. We know how to deal with inflation. Her way of dealing with inflation is to raise taxes. So like, okay, you got an economic meltdown, inflation, and you want to raise taxes. That doesn't sound like a good formula. But their theory, in modern monetary theory, there's nothing modern about it. This goes back over 100 years.
Yep.
It's not a theory. It's it's just a wacky idea. I mean, it's not a theory in the scientific sense where you have falsifiable propositions that they don't.
It's modern, Jim. It's modern.
It's modern. It's modern.
New.
Yeah. Well, but
it's old.
But you trace the origins back to the early 20th century, and what you find are German monetarist scholars who created what they call the state theory of money. Whenever I hear the word state, I get a little nervous. But the state theory of money, and it says the following: money will always be good if we say so, we the state, because we require it in taxes. So whether you like it or not, whether you have confidence in it, you have to earn it, because that's the only thing we take for taxes. Don't give us gold, silver, land, or rare wine. You got to pay the money. Therefore, you have to earn it. You have to like it, whether you like it or not. And I debated Marshall Auerbach, one of the other kind of scholars, and I said, so let's just play that out, Marshall. So, I'm not advising this, by the way, but so you don't pay your taxes, what happens? Well, you get a nasty letter from the IRS, and you still don't pay, you get another letter, then you get a lien on your house, and your bank account, and all that. And if you keep going, they show up at your house with guns, and they arrest you and put you in jail. So I said, this is monetary confidence at the point of the barrel of a gun, which sounds pretty neo-fascist to me. And people get all upset when you start talking like that. And I'm not name calling. Fascism means state power. That's what Mussolini said that it meant. So they don't want to really talk about that. And so here's my rebuttal. So that's the argument, and it is being implicitly adopted by all the Democratic candidates, because you cannot be coming out with these programs that will cost between $5 or $95 trillion for the Green New Deal. You cannot come out with these programs unless you think that we have a lot of headroom, we have a lot of fiscal headroom, that we can increase the deficit, we can double the deficit, or the debt rather, we can take the debt to $40 trillion, 220% of GDP.
That's their threshold.
Without problems. You have to believe that to believe. I don't believe that. To me, here's the critical point. First of all, yeah, you got to pay your taxes. But how much? So Mark Zuckerberg's worth like $100 billion, right? How much tax has he paid on the $100 billion? Almost none. He's paid some, but if you don't sell the stock, you don't owe the tax. So you're a founder, you got founder shares, it goes to $100 billion. All right, you give it to foundations, you hold on to it, but you don't owe a nickel of tax unless you sell it. Same thing is true of gold, by the way. So the wealthiest people don't pay taxes. They pay very little, just to be fair. Poor people don't pay taxes because you don't make enough money. We have a zero bracket amount and a standard deduction. So who pays taxes? It's the middle class and the upper middle class working people. So the Democrats are kind of sticking it to them, saying you have to take the dollar no matter what. But it's not true. There are alternatives. Maybe you're talking after-tax dollars, or maybe you have some tax shelters, or you get capital gains treatment. or deferral. There are one or more ways of minimizing or reducing your taxes, including things like 401ks. But at the end of the day, you don't have to stay in the dollar. You can buy gold or silver. You can buy land. You can buy a natural resource plays. There are a lot of things you can do. Or if you just say, get me out of here. I'm going to buy a new car because whatever. And then the car dealer, takes a spouse out to dinner or whatever. You can increase velocity. Inflation can come out of nowhere. And the idea that Professor Kelton can deal with that by raising taxes, because we're going to make it, we're really going to make it like the dollar because you got to pay more taxes.
Well, especially
will not work.
Especially in the currency by which you're compensated. I mean, people. I don't know how this is a debatable point, or even a point that people don't take as a given. But the very basic statement that a central banker is trying to devalue your purchasing power via the currency and raise the prices of the things that you're buying. To me, that is it's the most basic reality. It's also what's driven the inequality gap. Of course, we're going to get the asset price inflation. They're going to get the higher cost of living. That's the trade. And now MMT is effectively, but I'm going to offset that by paying off your student loans, like you say, giving you a free education, et cetera. In my head, Trump would love that. Maybe not the same goodies, but spend, and print is the same thing for every Republican, every Democrat. Clinton's the last one where the rate of change of debt actually declined. And that's because the actual real level of growth was so high. But every party believes in this. Why wouldn't Trump go for just a different bag of goodies?
Well, you're right, Keith, and I say this in the book. I don't rule out Trump getting behind MMT.
You don't?
No, I don't.
Okay,
no, I think, you're right. He's a real estate guy, loves leverage, loves borrowing, what's not to like. No, I don't.
Instead of spending on green, he'll spend on the military. It's just, it doesn't.
Maybe not in this election cycle, but down the road, or actually maybe if, you never know what he's going to say at one of these debates or something, he might just come out and say, what's wrong with that? So this is the problem. It was a little bit like Bitcoin when it first came out. Everyone's like, hey, it's going up, what's the problem? It's like, well, could go straight down, which it did, and I said that in December 2018. December 2017, it was about 8,000, but it was going up $1,000 a week or more. And I said, look, I'm not going to rule out this thing going to 20,000, but it's going to come straight down, and that's exactly what happened. So the same thing with the flaw in MMT is confidence. You get in, always start with money. What's money? And I always say, hey, well, the Fed has, M0, M1, M2. So even the Fed doesn't know what money is because they got 3 different definitions. But anything can be money: feathers, beads, digital, gold, silver, credit cards, debit cards, M0. They're all forms of money. And then people go, well, they're not backed by anything. Bitcoin's not backed by anything, or the dollar's not backed by anything. And I say, no, they're all backed by one thing, and it's the same thing, which is confidence. If you and I think something is money, and I tender it to you for goods or services, and you're confident that you can tender it to somebody else for goods and services, it's money, and it doesn't matter what it is. But the problem is confidence is fragile. It's very easily lost and impossible to gain or regain. So when you're messing around with money, you have to ask yourself, am I doing anything to damage confidence? Am I doing anything which could very quickly lead to this not being money or being worth less because of inflation?
Yeah, and the assets by which you own things. I mean, this is quintessentially what happened in and throughout '08.
Right.
You couldn't be more aggressive than Bernanke was.
Right.
And then he figured out that the move is moving out, and high yield spreads are blowing out at the same time. Treasury bond vol goes up when bond yields are going down that fast. And he's like, we need more. I need Hank. I need the bazooka. I need more. And as people realized that the more became the panic, then they started selling even gold. I mean, they sold everything. I mean, it's just
gold sold off initially. Came back, but it sold
came back.
Initially.
I mean, so you're like this. This is a very. That's why and I appreciate you're giving people a historical tutorial on this, because that to me is the straw that breaks the camel's back. It's actually when people believe that the Fed can and will, by even through the aiding and abetting of whoever the president is, to devalue the dollar like Bernanke did.
Right.
It was a 40-year low. When currency wars came out, it was a 40-year low in the U.S. dollar index and an all-time high in gold.
In gold, which is not surprising. I mean, the dollar price of gold is the inverse of the dollar.
Yeah.
Weak dollar, high dollar price for gold.
But also real yields collapsing. I mean, you were basically, look at the move gold's had recently, and that's with the dollar strong.
Right.
You think that, I mean, people sit there saying, oh, nice call on gold because we made the pivot in October.
Yep.
And it's like, I mean, I just buy more of it when real yields are falling, and I sell it when real yields are rising.
Right.
But imagine a scenario where people fundamentally believe there's a bipartisan support for MMT.
Yep.
I mean, what probability is there? There's a high probability of that, is there not?
Well, there's a 100%, close to 100% probability if a Democrat wins.
Exactly.
And then
with Trump, they realize it's such a good idea.
That Trump could get on board.
I mean, look how quick he was to waive the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
Like today's GDP report, it's like, aha. Like, where did the hedge eye predictive tracking algorithm get the 30 basis points wrong? Oh, government spending was up 35 basis points.
Right. And you know, $1 trillion deficits were last seen in the early Obama administration. So 2009, 2010, 2011, we had $1 trillion deficits. Then they got a little bit under control, all relative, down to 500 billion or so, and everyone's like, yeah, problem solved. They're back. Trump's going to have $2 trillion deficits back to back. You know, the metric I watch is debt to GDP. Because, you know, I say, well, if you owe $25,000 on your MasterCard, is that a problem or not? Well, if you're making $20,000, you're probably heading for bankruptcy.
Yep.
But if you're making $300,000, you can probably pay it off with one check. So you cannot understand debt in isolation. You have to compare it to the capacity to pay, and that's the GDP. But I have a whole chapter in my book, Aftermath. It's the you know, the history of debt in the United States, the brief history of debt in the United States.
And the rate of change of that debt growth as relative to your GDP decline.
Right.
So people miss the point that when you devalue the currency and you get economic stagflation instead of real economic GDP growth, what you end up is, you know, your denominator starts doing the wrong thing relative to what you're trying to do with the debt.
Right.
And it's like, 1970s.
Yep. And it's actually worse than that. You're exactly right, Keith, I agree, but it's actually worse than that. So I traced it from George Washington to Donald Trump. Okay.
Oh, good.
And
I'm sure he would think that that's very, very appropriate.
Well, when I was there, yeah, and put him in the same category. When I was researching it, people kind of have a naive assumption. Like George Washington comes in, no debt, and then it goes up and up and up and up and up, and here we are as Donald Trump, $23 trillion. That is not the story. When George Washington came in, we already had debt. We had a national debt before we had a nation. It was the Revolutionary War debt. And they turned to the Congress and said, what should we do? And the Congress said, well, we know what to do, just default. Why would you pay it? And Alexander Hamilton stood up and said, no, let's borrow more money, pay off the old debt, and then we'll borrow more money down the road and pay off the new debt. And as long as the economy is growing in a way that supports, that was the creation of the government bond market, and it's been going strong for 230 years. But Hamilton presupposed growth. The other thing is it never went straight up. It went up and down and up and down. It's a sine wave. So then you explore that and say, well, what was the dynamic behind the sine wave? And there's a one-word answer, which is war. Debt went up in times of war, and it came down in times of peace. And then it was sort of dry powder for the next war, which do come along, wars do come along, and then it went up again and down again. And I was struck by the bipartisan nature of it. And the most fascinating example was at the end of World War II when FDR died. He obviously didn't finish his term, but the debt to GDP ratio was about 120%, the highest in U.S. history. Well, from the time Harry Truman came in until the time Ronald Reagan came in, 1980, over that 35-year period, that debt to GDP ratio went from 120% to 30%, which is very manageable, well within bounds. But it was Democrats and Republicans, the Fed and the Treasury, working together. You had Truman, Kennedy, Johnson, and Carter, but you had the Republican side, you had Eisenhower, Nixon, and Ford, and they all worked together on it. This was never a partisan issue. It was like, hey, we got to get this down. Now Reagan comes in, and this idea that he was a fiscal conservative is nonsense. He was the last of the big spenders. He took the debt to GDP ratio up again to 50%. But to his credit, he won the Cold War. I mean, 600 ship Navy, Star Wars, and the Soviets, the Soviet Union, Russia, they just threw in the towel. They said, we can't compete with this. So let's give Reagan credit for winning the Cold War. George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, and Clinton didn't get it down, but they kept a lid on it. So for those 12 years of Bush and Clinton, they kept it around between 50 and 60%. And when Clinton left office, the national debt was $5 trillion. Okay, Bush 43 doubled it to $10 trillion. Obama doubled it again to $20 trillion. So 15, and Trump's thrown on two more trillion. So 17 of the $22 trillion is in the last 13 years, 14 years. So this idea that goes up and down and up and down is now off the rails. That has changed. Okay, we had 9/11 and a war in Afghanistan. A war in Iraq was a war of choice. Obama didn't start any new wars. Trump hasn't started any new wars. So this was a time when historically Obama and Trump, in theory, would have worked to get the deficit back down. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. So now we are off the rails. Now it is out of control. We've broken with this precedent. I said we used to have bipartisan competence. Now we have bipartisan incompetence. And this debt deal is just another example.
Well, it's the only way that they believe that they can provide a solution. Don't forget, that's what government is.
Right.
Hey, I'm here to help, as opposed to just leaving it alone.
And here's the irony. And I introduced the research of Carmen Reinhart and Ken Rogoff. And what they show, they have the book covers 800 years, but they've done a lot of studies for National Bureau of Economic Research that cover more recent periods, and they break it down between developed and developing. So you can really target what's going on, but the results are the same no matter what subset they study, which is that 90% is a critical threshold. What physicists would
debt
call
to GDP.
90% debt to GDP is a critical threshold.
And a deficit greater than 10% is double digits, and then triple digits are the two bogeys.
So the Keynesian idea is, okay, when you're in a liquidity trap, you're in a recession or a depression, government spending is the only alternative, increases aggregate demand, there's a multiplier effect. So you borrow $1, you spend $1, and you get $1.50 GDP. That actually works in very limited circumstances, but it can work, at least for a short period of time. But there's diminishing marginal returns. So you get to a point where you borrow $1, spend $1, and you get $1. What's the point of that? But past 90%, this is what Reinhart and Rogoff show, you borrow $1, you spend $1, and you get 90 cents of GDP. We actually get less GDP than the amount you borrow. So now what's going on? Back to your fraction. Well, now the debt's going up, but the growth is less than the increase in the debt. So the debt to GDP ratio is getting higher and getting closer to a loss of confidence. As simple as that.
I mean, I guess Neil Howe, our demographer, is very good at reminding me of this. He talks in 25 to 30-year cycles or generational cycles and the politics embedded therein. You just forget that happened before.
Right.
I mean, in the 1960s, everybody knew that inflation was the illusion of growth, not real growth.
Right.
And now that's the only option for both parties. It's a bipartisan solution, and it's to what degree are you willing to go there?
Right.
There is no other option.
Right. And so how do you break the cycle? So you're in a cycle.
And how do you break the dollar for real?
Correct.
When the Europeans and the British and the Asians and the Latin Americans are all trying to do it at the same time.
Well, we know
currency
how.
war.
Of course, this is the problem. Currency wars in back to 2010, 2011. You had Krugman and Stiglitz and Rubini, running around with their hair on fire, saying, the euro is falling apart. Greece has to be kicked out. Spain should quit and devalue the peseta and lower the unit labor costs. There'll be a northern tier and a southern tier. And I said, no, it's all nonsense. Nobody's getting kicked out. Nobody's quitting. They're not breaking it up. And the euro, I said, strong and getting stronger, and it went to $1.60 at the time. Obviously,
in 2011, the low of the dollar, the high of the euro.
Way down since then. But, and actually when I said it, there were 16 members of the Eurozone today. There were 19 members and a couple applications pending. I think Scotland will be the next country to join the Euro. But the point is, you can't have a weak dollar and a weak euro at the same time. It's mathematically impossible to devalue two currencies against each other at the same time. And so if you were going to have a weaker dollar, and that was the policy, you're going to have a stronger euro. It can't be any other way. It's a mathematical identity.
So that's where and that's what I mean. I mean, you truly for P.E. Powell, I call him, and Trump and or Elizabeth Warren or Bernie, whoever it is, they have to start to win that currency war. And you have to do a lot more than 25 beeps. You got to do a lot more than 25 than 50 beeps.
Right.
And Fed balance sheet reduction, et cetera. I don't think the market's going to, especially if I'm right that the economic cycle peaked, the triple peak.
Right.
GDP peaked, inflation peaked, profits peaked, all in Q3 of last year. So you're going to slow against that anyway.
Right.
So again, what are you going to do for me is what Wall Street's going to say.
Yeah.
Every meeting I have, I still have to run around doing institutional meetings.
Sure.
You get to go to cool places like Bretton Woods. But every single one has FOMO.
Right.
They're not talking about, well, what if we're all long FOMO?
Yeah, right.
I always go with God forbid, if my model's right, or if the data, which drives the model, is right. If the data continues to slow after the first cut, after the second cut, it's actually very consistent with what happened in 01 and what happened throughout 08.
Right.
Is that people start to say, wow, this is a problem.
Yep.
This is a problem. This is a real big problem because the government or whatever definition of government spending and or money printing, and now we could have both.
Right.
It just isn't enough. So that's why I do see that MMT as the only real thing that could break the dollar.
Yeah, a lot of people, they'll read my books and they run into them and they say, Jim, I really hope you're wrong. And I say, so do I.
Yeah.
I don't think I am. I wouldn't have written the book, but
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong because what's out there is pretty bad. So you have this debt problem we talked about. So what are the three ways out? Well, one way is growth.
Out of what?
Out of excessive debt to GDP
Yeah,
and
okay.
rising debt to
Yep.
GDP, the impact of that, the potential loss of confidence, et cetera. How do you get out of it?
Out of what I guess Dahlia would call the ugly deflation.
Right. So one way out is growth, but Reinhardt and Rogoff say you're not getting the growth. The debt is actually a headwind to growth. The debt is hurting your ability to grow your way out of the debt because the debt itself is a headwind to growth. Even if everything else was coming up roses, the debt slows you down. Okay, that's one way out. Second way out, default. We're not going to default. We print the money. We print the money, so we're not going to default. The third way out, and the only way out, is inflation. Now, it's a sad day when the central bank wants inflation and can't get it, but we've seen this movie before. We've seen this happen at both times, 1971 with Richard Nixon and 1933 with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You massively devalue the dollar.
Yep.
Now, they both had gold standards of different kinds, but they devalued the dollar against gold. We basically raised the price of gold. FDR took it from $20 an ounce to $35. Nixon took it from $35 an ounce to jump ball, but it ended up at $800 by January 1980. These were like 80, 90% devaluations of the dollar. You could do it against gold. The problem today is we don't have a gold standard.
Yeah.
I tell people you can get a personal gold standard, just go buy some gold. And all the gold bugs like, we need a gold standard. I was like, be careful what you wish for. If you want to make money in gold standard is the last thing you want because that's a fixed price.
And it's the last thing that people are long. What is the total global asset or U.S. asset allocation and global asset allocation institutionally or otherwise?
2%.
It's institutional money manager asset allocation is less than 0.5%.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But global asset allocation. So maybe that's, maybe that's the point. I mean, if they were actually long it like the Russians or whoever else,
right.
Buying it as much as they can.
Well, I had the occasion to ask Larry Summers at dinner a couple of days ago, and I had my own. I knew the answer, but I wanted to hear what his. I wanted to hear what his answer was. He's a big brain, and I said, okay, so in the last 10 years, Russia has more than tripled its gold reserves. And China has more than tripled its gold reserves, probably more because it
tripled.
It tripled in the last 10 years. Russia's gone from 600 tons to 2,300 tons. China's gone from 600 tons to about 2,000 tons, but they have a lot more off the books. But let's take the official number. And I said, why are they doing it? I didn't turn the question into a discussion. I didn't give a speech. I said, why are they doing it? And he sort of thought about it for a second, and he said, well, diversification. And I thought, well, that's actually technically a good. It's technically a good answer.
Part of the answer.
It's not a bad answer, but that means that you don't like the dollar so much. And then he said, this is a quote. He said, maybe they think the price will go up.
Yeah.
I said, I got Larry Summers on the record saying higher gold prices. I'm on board with that. But he's thoughtful, and those were the real reason is that they're preparing for a non-dollar-based system, and they're doing this in conjunction with development of a permissioned blockchain and a cryptocurrency that maybe
the Russians are
the Russians and the Chinese that maybe call it the Putin coin or the Xi coin or whatever, and with a permission. This is a permissioned blockchain, which is like joining a club. You only get in if the membership committee says you're in. Otherwise, you're out on the street. So permissioned blockchain, by the way, solves a host of scalability and sustainability problems that open blockchain currencies have. But so it's a club. So who's in the club? Well, Russia, China, Iran, Turkey, North Korea, Venezuela, but maybe they'll extend some invitations to the BRICS, and maybe Brazil has interest, and China can prevail in Hong Kong, so you have a money center, and now Iran sells oil to China, China sells infrastructure to Russia, Russia sells natural gas to Turkey, North Korea sells weapons to Iran. All this is going on, and what's missing from that trading network? The dollar. There's no dollar in it. And then, here's where the gold comes in. So your cryptocurrency, what's that? Well, but you just use it as a way to keep score. I mean, you can use baseball cards to keep score, but use it as a way to keep score, and you have deficits and surplus, just like any trading network. And then periodically, once a year or twice a year, you settle up, but you settle up in gold. And the importance of that is you need a lot less gold if you're settling on a net basis instead of a gross basis. If every time I buy weapons, I got to give you gross gold. Okay, but if I'm buying something from you and you're buying something from me, the net's a lot smaller. You need a lot less gold.
Yep.
Completely feasible, heading in that direction. This is what we told the Pentagon 10 years ago when we did the financial war game in 2009.
And it also solves, I mean, 'cause over the, Bitcoin, I don't want to get into crypto or Bitcoin, but I mean, one of the biggest problems that the bears have is that there's nothing behind it. There's no government behind it. Right. But if you backstop a government crypto with gold.
Right, that's what we're talking about.
Now we're talking about crypto that I really like,
yeah,
especially like if I have my gold.
Yeah. This is not Bitcoin. This is a new currency, permission distributed ledger, backed by gold, settled on a net basis, so you don't need as much gold.
Yep.
And you can always buy more. I mean, I told the Treasury, I talked to the government officials all the time, and I said, well, what do we do about this? I said, well, you ought to buy gold. It's just an open market operation. What does the Fed do now? They buy Treasury notes. So I buy Treasury notes from your Goldman Sachs. I, put the money in your account. You probably deposit it back with me, but that's up to you. So just buy some gold and print the money. Mm-hmm. We get two things. You get inflation, and you would front run the Russians and the Chinese. And then I recommended the intelligence services take a closer look at refineries. That's where all the refineries in Switzerland, that's where the gold goes. They get all this junk, from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York, mm-hmm. These gnarly old 1920 bars. They melt them down, put them into 1 kilo bars, and ship them off to China. Get in the middle of that, so you need better intelligence. The U.S. Fed should conduct open market operations in gold. The price will go up. Yeah, that makes it harder for your enemies to get more of what they're trying to use to defeat you. But this is a little out of the box.
No, but you know what? It's out of the box at the next part of the movie. Or in the next movie. This is like, maybe you could start a brand like Marvel where there's endless comics of content, and you have to just keep going down the line. To get to that part of the line, the U.S. or whoever the administration is at that point is going to have to react to what you're essentially saying is already in motion at the other part of the line.
Right.
It's not, I don't know if you'd agree with this, isn't it a little bit like the U.S. taking over as the world's reserve currency from the British and the Europeans at a different point in time? Mm-hmm. Where basically it's like, oh, I'll just let you guys all be as dysfunctional as you can be while George Soros publicly shorts you, and we use the power of our own bank balance sheet, called Citigroup, what would Soros do? I mean, it's like it was a coordinated effort. Kozner, every one of these guys, oh yeah, we're going to short the pound. We know that they have to devalue. Right. It's basically balance of power, which historically has always followed the base of GDP and the growth of GDP, which the Chinese think they'll have by 2025. They think they'll be #1 in the world on GDP.
The Soros story is true, although what's less known is that Soros got a back channel heads up from the Deutsche Bundesbank at the time, said we don't have their back. So he went into it with a lot of air cover, so to speak.
Yeah. But he went with it.
But it worked exactly the way you described.
Side.
You can short a whole country if you have enough.
We go with it with our guys.
Yep.
And quite clearly, the group of guys that you stated, if it's Russian, Chinese, and Iranian, is not our guys.
Yeah, right. By the way, Iran had got not clear, but maybe as much as 100 tons of gold from the United States. When Obama did that payoff, when they dropped the stuff on the pallets, he had to give him like $150 billion. He had to go to the Netherlands to get euros because the Iranians said we don't want dollars. So Obama's like, all right, here's dollars, give us the euros. So they were just they wrapped them up in big $1 million or $1 million euro bundles, put them on a pallet, just shoved them off a cargo plane with a bunch of gold. No one knows exactly how much, but Iran could have as much as 100 tons, which is a lot of gold. They're hanging on to it.
Really?
So yeah, Iran is a gold power, but they haven't disclosed it. But they're in this network, and Turkey is a major gold buyer right now. Russia's reserves, the total reserve account that was back on its way to 500 billion, is 20% gold, not 2% or 5%.
So as a percentage of GDP, that's high.
Oh yeah, no, Russia's,
of Russian GDP.
Well, that's another good point, Keith. That's another metric I use: gold to GDP, and the theory is
by country.
Gold is by country.
Is that in your new book too?
It's in the prior book, The Road to Ruin.
Okay.
So if gold is real money, I think it is. So gold is real money,
remembered.
And GDP is your real economy.
Yep.
So gold to GDP kind of says, all right, how much money do you have relative to the size of the economy? The U.S. and China are about 1.6 or 7%. Russia's over 6%. So they're very little external debt, highest gold to GDP ratio of any major economy, and they've got 20% of the reserves in gold. The other thing about gold, I sound like gold salesman. People accuse me of, oh, you're just trying to sell gold. I was like, no, I'm not a dealer. I don't sell gold. You can buy it or not. It's up to you. But I am an analyst. I do look at it, and I do think of it in a geopolitical context.
And you did author a book called The New Bull Case for Gold.
I had to write that book because I was so fed up with, I don't mind criticism and debate. I'm all for it. But the criticisms were all wrong. I mean, they were just empirically, historically wrong. So I had to write a book just to kind of push all that to one side. Even at Bretton Woods a couple days ago.
What's a framework? I mean, it's important that we have multiple frameworks if we're going to have a multi-factor, multi-duration debate.
Right.
So yeah, God bless you for putting a framework out there. It's supposed to just spewing one-liners.
Yeah.
The amount of people on Twitter that tell me that I'm going to get train wreck long gold because inflation's coming back. I'm just like, I'm actually long gold for real yields falling, you idiot. I mean, it's like people's preconceptions about gold. It's good on you for doing that. That's also one of my favorite books.
Right.
And it doesn't mean you have to be long X amount of gold all the time. It helps you understand gold.
Right.
Which is what you taught yourself.
So that you can introduce it into a monetary debate if you so choose.
If you want it.
Very enthusiastic about Judy Shelton going on the Federal Reserve Board.
You like her?
Oh yeah, I do.
She's going for, like, if she must have my economic outlook because she wants 50 basis point cut.
She's a smart lady. She reads a lot, and she everyone's like, oh, she gets on the board.
She likes you?
She we kind of have a Twitter back and forth, and she's actually featured in chapter 6 of my new book.
Oh, she is. Aftermath?
Yeah, that chapter is called the Mar-a-Lago Accord, and basically I posit a new Bretton Woods. And the point I make is
Mar-a-Lago Accord.
Well, what better? Actually, the Mar-a-Lago in its own, Marjorie Meriwether Post built it. It's a National Historic Landmark, but it bears a resemblance to the palace in Genoa where they had the 1922 International Monetary Conference. So like kind of old school. But the point is, I spoke to Ben Bernanke personally and John Lipsky. I don't know if you know John, but John was the head of the IMF for a period of time. The first American ever to run it because DSK got arrested and they weren't ready with Christine Lagarde, so he had to step in. But they separately, in two conversations, one-on-one, 9,000 miles apart, they both said the international monetary system is incoherent. And I know they didn't rehearse that for my benefit. It just told me that word is in the air among the super elites. And it is, because there's no anchor. Now, it doesn't mean you go back to a gold standard tomorrow, but you have to confront the problem. This is what we're talking about with the dollar and the euro. It's two kids on a seesaw.
Yeah.
They can't both devalue. The only way two currencies can devalue at the same time is if they devalue against a third anchor. Like you can take the euro and the dollar down.
This is why this is it doesn't have to be right on any specific duration. That would be completely arrogant to time it. But there is a map to get there.
Right.
And all of global macro trades, particularly quantitative strategies trade, and all of my processes operate off the US dollar index price.
Right.
So the US dollar index is basically the euro.
Yep.
I mean, so yeah, you just have to knock that balance of power over to another power.
Right.
And then that power, if it's credible, I mean, China's going to, if they lie for long enough, they'll have the #1 GDP in the world by 2025. Mm-hmm. Whatever they decide to denominate in or have their currencies and credit backstopped in. Currently, they have to buy it funded in dollars.
Right.
They have a current account deficit that's developing after having a current account surplus for as far as the eye can see, which was great when you're running 10, 12% made up growth.
Yep.
Now you're running half of that still made up. You're running a current account deficit, and you're funding your debts in dollars.
Right.
So they would love nothing more than not to have to do that.
Yep.
They can't even go dovish right now because the dollar's strong.
Right.
The PBOC guy goes, yeah, I see the Fed going dovish, but we can't do it.
Right.
Yeah, they can't. They could in 2016 when the dollar was going down.
Yep. And the problem with China is a good example of what's called Goodhart's Law. And Goodhart's Law says that whenever a metric becomes the object of policy, it loses meaning as a metric. In other words, if it's just out there, you can study it, put it in a factor analysis or whatever. But the minute you target the metric, it's no longer valid as a metric. It becomes just an expression of policy. Mm-hmm. And Chinese GDP is there. Chinese GDP means nothing because, first of all, I'm not saying they totally lie. I'm saying they make it whatever they want to by policy. Mm-hmm. So when it's coming in a little bit low, just build some more ghost cities. That's GDP. It's a complete waste.
Yeah.
If you had generally accepted accounting principles, you'd write it off the same as soon as the building was done. But it is technically GDP because there's steel, concrete, glass, construction, et cetera, in it, and it's all driven by credit, funded by wealth management products that people think are bank deposits, but they're not really. So it's a massive Ponzi. Not to mention the fact that the investment component, they're about 45% of GDP is investment. In the U.S., it's more like 22%, which is normal for a developed economy. But 45% of GDP is investment, of which half is wasted. So if you take that percentage, if you haircut it by that amount, you would get quickly to a number like 4 or 5%, and a lot of analysts think it's even lower. They think China's GDP, maybe it's 3% or maybe less. So, but on this massive credit bubble, so that has its own instabilities.
But it also has its own incentives, and they're long term. I mean, Xi's in it to win it. The guy used to live in a cave. He wants to come out, stay out of that cave, or not get killed.
Right.
Okay, we have some, and we're hashtagging it. I believe. What are we saying, guys? Ask Jim. Ask Jim Rickards. So I got a ton of questions, and I started asking them late, Jim, just because I could talk to you for the rest of the day. But we're getting tons of questions on gold, and I think people say, okay, look, tell me how and how many different ways you would buy it, and is this in Aftermath? Actually, do you go through?
It's in Aftermath.
Because some people are like, they're scared of the ETF. Should they own the physical? Should they own both? I mean, there's a lot of questions about that.
Right. So first of all, if you're a day trader, securities driven, the ETF is a good proxy. I don't view it as a store value.
Right.
I don't view it as protection against the kinds of things we're talking about in the book. But if you just need to trade it day in, day out, that's fine, at least for the time being. I recommend physical bullion. Now the new standard, gold standard, no pun intended, is the 1 kilo bar. So it used to be the 400-ounce bar. That's still the LBMA good delivery bar.
A little heavy.
By the way, that was intentional. That was done around World War I. That's when they created it, and they did it on purpose. They wanted something that was so heavy you couldn't carry it around. So it's like, we're still on the gold standard, sort of, but all the gold's in the vaults and we control them. So no one was walking. And prior to World War I, if you were Brit and you went from London to Bombay at the time, now Mumbai, you had a purse of gold coins. You might put it in the ship's safe. They were British sovereigns, and they weren't 1 ounce. They were like a quarter ounce. So it was spendable. And that's how that's what you did. After World War I, forget it. Nobody walked around with gold coins because there weren't any gold coins. There were 400-ounce bars that I've lifted quite a few. They're 35 pounds. I can say, I smile for the camera, but it's like, oh, my arm hurts. But it's like, it's a heavy free weight. But the new standard established by the Chinese is a 4.9, so 99.99% pure, 1 kilo bar.
Okay.
So they're about $50,000 a piece at the market. So you buy those. And if you're an individual, I like the 1 ounce American Gold Eagles, and they're very high quality. Counterfeiting problems go away. But that's the way to own it. And I run into having lived in this neighborhood. We're out here in Fairfield County for 35 years. You run into your share of billionaires, and I've never met one who they can trade stocks and bonds all day, but they all have gold, and they don't say it publicly, but they all got gold. It's all in a vault. And then I run into the ones that where's your gold? And they go, well, it's in Singapore, and good jurisdiction, tax free, and all that. I said, well, how are you going to get there? I got a private jet over at Westchester. It's like, well, how are you going to fuel it when the power goes down? It's like, why is the pilot going to fly you and leave his family? It's like people think they've got these plans all worked out, but they don't really think it through.
Yeah, they do own it. Jim, but if China or Russia create this inter-network coin, don't they need this is a good question. Don't they need dollars to buy gold? At least the deficit trader inside their network that need to balance with the other.
Well, it's why it's a very good question. It's why they're buying as much gold as they can right now.
Yep.
It's why China does not.
Why the Russians and Chinese are.
Russians are Chinese buying gold hand over fist. The country that should be buying gold that isn't is the United States.
Yes.
But Russia and China is buying as fast as they can.
But who was the country that bought a shitload of gold back before when the British had the world's reserve currency? The U.S.
Right.
I mean,
well, in 1950, the United States had 20,000 tons of gold.
Yes.
By 1970, we were down to 9,000 tons. Today, it's a little bit over 8. Where did the 11,000 tons go? Well, it went to France, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, our trading partners, Japan, et cetera, because in those days you could hand in your dollars and get gold. So China comes along 30 years later, 40 years later, they're the dominant mercantilist power. They've got the huge trade surpluses, and they're looking around like, where's the gold? We don't get gold anymore. We just get treasury notes. So all these other guys got gold, we get paper. And so they just set out on their own gold standard, and they're pursuing it as fast as they can.
Now here's, I mean, actually, and I gotta give it to a lot of people, but for putting in these questions. But a lot of people just have a thing that they state, particularly if you enter, which you do, enter political names and political periods. Like people have a view that is often politicized on what actually happened.
Right.
It's just a view. It's not a multi-factor, multi-duration, mathematical view. Often, it's just an assumed view. So you've agitated those people. Well done. This one is kind of in between. I actually think that this one isn't completely politicized. Decline of debt to GDP from Truman to Reagan was not due to the down payment of debt, due to growth in inflation. Was not inflation the primary vehicle?
Well, it is true. No, we didn't pay it on the debt at all. The debt went up, but what we did is we grew the economy.
Yes.
And that was real growth.
Yep.
The numbers I'm talking about.
That's what we said.
Yeah. So yeah.
Same thing with Clinton.
Yeah. The numerator grew. The debt has rarely gone. Talking about nominal value, the debt has rarely gone down. Andrew Jackson, 1836, paid off the national debt. Andrew Jackson's legacy was zero national debt and no central bank. He destroyed the second bank of the United States and paid off the national debt. So thank you. We had 80 years of great prosperity with no central bank and starting out with a low debt level. So no, you don't. It's not because you paid down the debt. It's because you
have real growth.
You have real growth.
And
correct.
I can't say this enough times to people. I mean, because I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I'm a Canadian, and even if I was American, I wouldn't be either. It's just like an embarrassment to be about these political parties because they do the same thing. In my world, I mean, it's bipartisan. But 1993 to 1999, or 1983 to 89, if Reagan's your guy, or if you're a Dem, pick it. The average real GDP growth rate was around 4.5%, and the average price of oil was sub 20.
Right.
The dollar was strong in both periods.
Yep.
Strong dollar, strong America, period.
Right.
Strong dollar in any country perpetuates the purchasing power of the people.
Correct.
So, our policies have to go, I mean, they don't have to, but there's no, nobody wants me to run for a Canadian to run for the President of the United States. At some point, they'll want to
Prime Minister, maybe.
But you don't, it's inconsistent with history. And it's also, if you look at any period where debt as a percentage of GDP went down, it's a function of those periods that I just mentioned.
That's right.
So it's it's an interesting thing. Is there a hope in hell that anybody runs on that political platform?
No.
You can't, because Trump is running for the Republicans, which is basically like a Democrat running on MMT.
Right.
And you have the Democrats, like you said, running on MMT.
Well,
so you got to wait for the next one.
They're not running on it, and the reason is that there's a lot of pain involved. But my view is the pain is unavoidable. If you want real growth in the future and a sustainable debt level, and it doesn't have to be a strong dollar, it just has to be a solid dollar.
Stable, non-volatile.
Stable dollar is a good
Actually,
way to put it.
if you say it that in volatility speak, which is, by the way, what is the least volatile asset class you could own right now? Gold.
Right.
The vol on gold is like falling towards 7. Oil vol's even at 33, and they're trying to cut rates. But I mean, the lack of volatility is also something that creates the confidence. Is another way to think about that.
Right, and cash does the same thing.
So maybe that's why the Russians, Chinese want the low vol to back it.
And it's kind of what Larry Summers said. It's like, if your treasury notes are bouncing around, your euros or your bunds are bouncing around, et cetera, and heaven help you if you have stocks in a reserve position. It's okay for a portfolio. Gold's a stabilizer. But that's why I use ratios, because I don't, I don't have to get into the numbers. The debt pretty much always goes up. The question is, are you growing faster? That's the key.
Okay, here. Let's see, what else we got? I just fell off here. If Jim is correct, how can Japan do it with 2% debt to GDP and actually just keep on going?
Right. Well, the answer in Japan is there are two answers. Number one, they owe most of the debt to themselves. They don't have a large external debt. So I compare it to a bunch of people in the lifeboat, in the middle of the ocean, sharing the food. Like, so far, so good, but keep going. And I had an interesting conversation with Saki Kabara, who was known as Mr. Yen. He was, I think, Deputy Minister of Finance.
That's a great nickname.
Mr. Yen. But there was a recent conversation. He was household name in these circles in the 80s and early 90s, but I met him a couple years ago. And I said, I kind of asked the same question. I said, the lost decade is now 3 lost decades. You have periodic recessions, low growth, disinflation. You're not growing. I said, you're never going to get to 2% inflation. He said, we're absolutely not going to get to 2% inflation. So he agreed with that. I said, it's like, what are you going to do? But it was true that when I go to the Ginza, like the lights are on, the restaurants are open, everyone's having a good. And he made a profound point. He said, our population is declining, so our per capita GDP figures are outperforming our total GDP figures. And I see the math. I said, yeah, that's right. Interesting. So I said, so the end game is you have the 3rd largest economy in the world with 1 citizen who's like the richest person in the world, even though it's gone down. But his point was that on a per capita basis, they're doing a lot better.
Yeah, and I hear this a lot. I'm sure you do too. I mean, social harmony.
Yeah.
But again, Canadian came to American in the 1990s, me, because of free market capitalism.
Right.
To be clear, bipartisan policy on MMT, if it is to be Japanese, is not free market capitalism.
Right. Again, Trump likes low rates, leverage, minimum equity, declare bankruptcy when you have to, and move on. So I don't exclude the possibility that he could. And by the way, MMT is not that different from neo-Keynesianism. Now, the neo-Keynesians will say, well, you can't go unlimited, and by the way, you got to set priorities, and the priorities are always political. And the MMTers are like, well, there really is no limit, and we can spend money on everything. All right, that's a difference. But the basic idea that you can just fund everything with debt, there's no constraint, and name your own priority, is the same.
Yeah. Here's a good one. Maybe this is one of the last questions. I knew somebody was going to mention this, and I don't know if you have thoughts, but Jim, what's up with Kudlow? Wasn't he the strong dollar guy?
Look, Larry Kudlow is a really nice guy personally, and a very, very decent and smart individual. His forecasting record is not great, and I think, I wouldn't disparage him, but he ought to have some pom-poms when he comes out, because he is a cheerleader. Now, maybe that's his job. If you're the head of the National Economic Council, that's probably your job. But today's GDP figure is funny. It just reminded me of Wall Street, where you lower the expectations on earnings and then you beat them, and everyone on the CNBC is like, oh, it's a beat. It's like, yeah, but look at the actual numbers. Is it higher or lower? What's the trend here? But you rig the expectations, you beat it, whatever, and your stock goes up a penny.
Yeah, the pom-pom piece is
so the 2.1% beat the 1.8 or 1.3 expectation. I understand that. 2.1% is lower than the 10-year average growth since the end of the last recession. You go June 2009 to June 2019, or now in July. The average is about 2.2, a little slightly higher, about 2.2. This quarter came in at 2.1. You're below the 10-year average. So I wouldn't get too excited.
And most importantly, you're well below where we were when hashtag U.S. growth was accelerating.
Correct.
I mean, this was, if you're data driven, you saw that last year. I mean, guys, show slide 14, I think it is in the global macro deck, where you can see, we banged a 4, stayed at 3.4. Now we're 2 and falling, and taking out the Q4 restatement was a disaster, by the way. So Larry should just call those, like they're right up there on the screen. They are what they are. Everybody should know them. There shouldn't be any political obfuscation over these numbers. I think the bigger question when it comes to Kudlow has to do with the conservatism. Because what I'm basically saying is, and by the way, the 2.1 beat the 1.8 that we were at because of government spending was the delta. So Larry Kudlow is not a big government, or wasn't a big government spending guy, and he certainly wasn't a dollar devaluation guy.
Yeah. By the way, that government spending component is going to go up, as, looking down the road, and it's all about 2020 election and electoral politics and all that. But my first reaction was it's lower than the 10-year average, and that's not a healthy sign.
And the most important thing, like I always, and this is the only thing I really care about, it's the secret to the universe, of course, is calculus, which is the rate of change. The rate of change just slowed again. And this on a sine curve slows again and again. That's what economies do.
Exactly.
And the promise is that a central banker can, I think that's our cartoon of the day, can part the heavens and manage the seas and eliminate economic gravity.
And that's exactly right, Keith. And this is what I heard from the Fed officials at Bretton Woods, that rates are coming down. This wasn't like whisper it in the hall. This is like, no, this has to happen. Real rates have to come down. Nominal rates have to come down. The zero bound may not be a bound. I mean, they were just saying this. So
how can guys like Jeff? Maybe the last question from me, just because I get to ask it. Like, how do guys like Jeff Gunlack and all the people that were telling us that the 10-year yield was going to go to 4 only 10 months ago?
Yep.
We're at 2.
Right.
How do they fight? Like, how do you fight the Fed on that? They always tell me not to fight the Fed. How are they going to? Like, how do they do that?
Look, after my career at Citibank, retired from Citibank, and then I went to Wall Street, went to the dark side, and I was at one of the major government bond dealers for 10 years, and that's when I got my immersion in fiscal policy and finance and derivatives and all that kind of stuff. And some of those guys are still around, still trading. That's fine, good for them. One by one, they're getting carried out feet first. And the reason is that when we started this firm, just back in the early 80s, interest rates were 13%.
Yeah.
You could buy a 30-year bond maturing in 2016 at 15%. It was a good buy. But the point is, so nominal rates came down from 13, 14% to 2%. So they just kind of intuitively said, we can't believe it. We've never seen it so low. It can't go any lower. It's got to go up. So they shorted the bonds. Sorry, nominal rates came down. Real rates didn't.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, look at Germany. And why could Germany be negative 40, 50 basis points for the bonds? Well, there are only a couple explanations for that. One is, you think the euro is going to get a lot stronger, because if you're a U.S. dollar-based investor and you want to go long euros for 5 years, you can't do it. You can't do it in the futures market. You can do it. You can roll a position, but the one way to lock in a euro position for 5 or 10 years is to buy bonds. So now, negative rate, but that's sort of like paying an option premium for a five-year call on the euro. So one, it would be if the euro got a lot stronger, that would work. And the other one is that U.S. rates are going to come down a lot more. So and maybe even go negative. So that's where we're heading.
That's a big euro-dollar position that people have on. People say, Keith, good call. It's a consensus. So now it's like, well, consensus can remain. Yeah. Particularly if both parties in the U.S. agree. Right. And that's thanks for illuminating that. And most importantly, I think you are the only person. By the way, you're the author of it, so it doesn't surprise me. But you're the only person I've spoken to in months that's tied this developing interest in MMT, which is, to your point, not new, to what the other team is going to do, which is exactly what currency war is. It's the A against the blue team. Didn't you call it that way? And I think that's like whenever, and I go back to the quote that we started with. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. Right. So thanks for that. If you haven't read Currency Wars or any of Jim's books, you absolutely have to do that. It'll help you be a student of the game to start, and then you could try to help get better at the game, which we all do as we go further in time. Aftermath is the most recent book, and thanks for your time. You can follow both Jim and I on Twitter.